You wake before the sun and wonder why your soul feels muted, as if colors have drained from morning. Is this what numbness sounds like when even birdsong feels far away? In the hush, you are invited to make an honest lament, to speak without polish. A pale line of sky hints at a dawn awakening, and you remember that God is steady shelter, unchanging goodness, and gentle strength. You set down restless thoughts and offer a surrendered heart, asking for a quiet mind and simple obedience. You open the window and ask for a breath of scripture to move through you like a soft breeze. You dare to pray for a spirit's flame to kindle what has cooled. You long to rise into a rekindled walk that is faithful in small steps. Every 2 Timothy 1:6, you can ask God to fan into flame the gift already entrusted to you. Cooling does not cancel calling, embers respond to wind. What burden do you lay at His feet today? And what desire do you entrust to His timing? Now, as your heart grows still, we step into the prayer that meets you where you are. You begin where you are, not where you wish you were, because truth becomes the doorway that opens toward healing. You name the flatness, the dull echo inside, the way prayer has felt like mouthing words with little warmth. You speak to God with unvarnished candor. You feel distant, uninspired. Tired of pretending that every morning is bright, you tell Him of the weight you carry, the unanswered request, the complicated relationship, the work that drains more than it gives, and you let the words fall without dressing them up. In this room, before the day fully breaks, honesty is not a threat to grace, it is the path through which grace moves. The soft grey outside your window becomes fittings a sky eye not yet blazing, yet faithful in its turning. You rest in that rhythm and whisper what you were tempted to hide. You remember that lament is not complaining for its own sake. It is trust choosing to speak in the dark. You practice a gentle posture, shoulders released, jaw unclenched, hands open on your knees. You breathe slowly and let the breath become prayer. Here I am. On the inhale, have mercy. On the exhale, you allow silence to be a friend rather than a verdict against you. The quiet does not accuse, it invites. As you linger, you discover that sorrow voiced becomes sorrow held, and sorrow held can be comforted. You do not rush to fix yourself or force emotion. You offer presence. This offering is small and costly, and it is enough for this minute. You tell God the specific words you avoided yesterday because they felt too raw. You confess the ways you tried to manufacture fervor and the ways you numbed yourself with distraction. You let tears come if they rise, or you let the absence of tears be valid if they do not. You speak the truth about disappointment without concluding your story with despair. You recall that Scripture gives you permission to pour out your heart like water, not to impress, but to entrust. For Psalm 62:8, you can empty what you carry because God receives, not rejects. Refuge means safe room for your whole story, not only the neat sentences. You sit with that assurance until your breathing steadies. You consider where the numbness began. Was it a slow drift after a long stretch of business? Was it a wound you minimized, a prayer you shelved, a habit that crowded your attention? You gently trace the thread without self-condemnation, asking for insight more than explanations. Wisdom often arrives quietly. It is enough to ask. You listen for a small nudge, call that person, delete that app, take a walk at first light. Write down one gratitude you have been ignoring. You do not need a grand solution. You need the next true step. Honesty clears the fog so a single path can appear. Now you bring your confession toward hope. You say aloud that God's compassion is not measured by your sensation level. You remember past mornings when warmth returned unexpectedly and realize today's dryness cannot cancel tomorrow's renewal. You ask for a softened interior, but you also ask for steadiness, even if feelings take time. You end this lament with a simple line: "Hold me close while I feel far." That sentence becomes your tether. As the horizon lifts, you sense the first faint brightness gathering at the edge of your room. Your words have made space, and in that space, God meets you, not with spectacle, but with nearness that does not leave. You watch the horizon shift from charcoal to pearl, and you let the slow arrival of color teach your soul that change rarely shouts. You have prayed for fireworks, morning answers with embers, and that is mercy. You stand by the window, unclench your expectations, and welcome faint radiance as a tutor rather than a disappointment. You tell yourself the truth: sensation may lag, but direction can lead. You turn your face toward brightness, not demanding a rush of feeling, just consenting to be lit. You straighten your spine, feel the floor steady your feet, and receive the earliest glow like a benediction. You choose openness before emotion, alignment before enthusiasm. You whisper, "Guide me," even if your pulse has not caught up with your choice. You notice small signals of aliveness, a bird stitching sound through the air, a breeze slipping under the sill, the scent of rain that left during the night. You let these modest heralds interrupt the story that says nothing is happening. You begin to thank God for particulars instead of abstractions: this warmth in your cup, this roof that kept you dry, this memory of laughter that visits like a friendly knock. You name 3 gifts and then a 4th, not to earn favor but to widen the aperture through which gratitude enters. You discover how acknowledgement loosens the numb crust and lets tenderness seep in at the edges. You allow gratitude to be ordinary, the way sunrise is ordinary yet indispensable. You write one sentence in a notebook: "Today I will notice gifts before problems," and you underline it once. You pick up a short passage and read it slowly, as a pilgrim studies a waystone. One phrase catches and holds you, so you repeat it under your breath until it roots. You pause between sentences long enough to hear your breathing again. You let questions rise and fall without panic. What are you inviting me to release? Where do you want me to begin? You resist the urge to conquer the passage. You let it conquer hurry. You give yourself permission to move at dawn's tempo. Your aim is not quantity but contact, not speed but saturation. You close your eyes and let the words rest over your chest like a warm cloth, trusting their quiet work. You remember that watchmen do not create daylight. They attend to it with alert joy. You learn their patience. My soul waits for the Lord more than watchmen for the morning, more than watchmen for the morning. For Psalm 136, you cultivate expectation without anxiety, because night has a schedule and so does grace. You position yourself where light will find you. You refuse to measure God by your clock, and in that refusal, rest begins to bloom. You test gentle practices that fit this season, 10 slow breaths, with a sacred word on the exhale. A brief walk beneath open sky before messages crowd your phone. A handwritten note to someone whose name surfaces. A small act of service done anonymously. You select one, not all, and you repeat it tomorrow because seeds sprout under steady care. You remember that awakening is often cumulative, more like a tide than a switch. You keep spaces uncluttered so radiance has room to land. You ask for courage to choose small fidelity over dramatic vows. You step away from the window and open the door, letting morning air touch your face. And you say, "Yes, Lord," not because you feel ablaze, but because you choose alignment, trusting that warmth follows orientation. You stand in the growing light and open your hands, as if releasing pebbles you have carried through a long night. You picture a small altar in your room, a simple space on the windowsill, and you set today their calendar, conversations, deadlines, the unspoken ache you would rather avoid. You whisper, "Yours," and mean it as best as you can. You loosen your grip on outcomes and choose availability over mastery. You trade the tight coil of self-importance for a servant's readiness. You remember that giving yourself doesn't begin with heroic gestures. It begins with consent, repeated gently. You breathe out demand and breathe in willingness, and the room seems to widen. Yielding becomes a doorway rather than a defeat. You review the places where you have tried to be your own keeper. You name the pressure to perform, the strategies you trust more than obedience, the subtle bargains you make with anxiety. You bring them into sunlight and let them lose their power. You say, "Lid," not as a slogan, but as a posture. You decide to honor limits as gifts, to accept that you are a creature with margins, not a machine. You remember that God's pace is kind, and kindness makes space for oxygen. You refuse the lie that surrender shrinks your life. You discover that release enlarges your interior. The early breeze brushes your skin like a reminder that guidance accompanies letting go. You take a sheet of paper and write plans. Underneath, you list the most pressing items. Then you draw a line through the heading and write offering. The tasks do not vanish, they move to another ownership. You pray sentence prayers over each. Bless this meeting. Guard this relationship. Provide for this bill. Protect this body. You ask for wisdom and courage for one faithful action per item. You choose to give your best and leave the rest in hands more capable than yours. You sense relief entering like quiet water in dry ground. You whisper gratitude for governance that is wiser than your calculations. Not my will, but yours be done. So Luke 22:4-2, you echo the garden prayer not as resignation, but as alignment. You refuse fatalism and choose reverent confidence, believing that yield opens room for resurrection. You accept that love sometimes leads through shadowed groves toward dawn you cannot yet see. You consider how surrender shapes your words. You resolve to speak truth without grasping for control, to apologize quickly when you wound, to bless generously when slighted. You picture a bridled river, power directed rather than spilled. Your tongue becomes such a river, strength harnessed for encouragement, not domination. You decide to practice hidden service where no applause can reach you. You prepare a simple breakfast for someone. Send an undeserved note of delight. Clean a corner that no one notices. These small obediences become incense in the morning air. Your inner temperature rises not from hype, but from humility doing its quiet work. You invite God to write on the blank spaces you normally fill with worry. You ask for sensitivity to gentle nudges, a person's name that surfaces, a verse that lingers, a prompting to pause instead of push. You choose to pace yourself by grace rather than panic. You accept that some doors will remain closed today and trust that detours can also be guidance. You ask to be interruptible without losing direction. You remind yourself that surrender is not a one-time event. It is a steady cadence, like footsteps along a forest path. As sunlight stretches across the floor, you feel lighter, not because everything is solved, but because ownership has shifted. Your surrendered heart becomes a field open to rain, ready for seed, available for harvest in time. You open a window and a page, letting dawn air move through both room and text. And you decide to breathe with the sentence in front of you. You inhale slowly as your eyes travel a single line. You exhale by turning that line into prayer. You do not skim, you linger. You read aloud so your ears join your eyes, because trust often grows when truth is heard. You let quiet stretch between phrases like space between waves. You notice a word that warms slightly, as if a coal beneath ash begins to glow when stirred by a gentle wind. You circle it with a pencil, whisper it twice, and ask for its meaning to rest, not rush. You allow that warmth to move through the cold corners you feared were permanent, and you lean into its quiet radiance. You picture 4 gentle movements: read, reflect, respond, rest. You read a few lines with unhurried cadence, attending to small commas and holy pauses. You reflect by asking, what does this reveal about your heart? And what invitation sits inside this sentence? You respond with one concrete, yes, you can enact before noon. You rest by sitting 2 minutes in stillness, letting insight settle deeper than analysis. You keep posture involved, shoulders released, jaw soft, hands open on your knees, because bodies remember what minds forget. You sip water, breathe evenly, and allow the syllables to sink. You are not cramming for an exam, you are receiving a gift. You let gentleness, not hurry, become your teacher. You give permission to bring questions to the page without embarrassment. You write them in the margin and offer them like seeds. Why this command? How does this comfort the suffering? Where is Jesus in this story? Curiosity is not irreverence, it is hunger. You let cross-references be friends rather than rabbit holes, following 1 or 2 that seem most relevant. When mystery remains, you hold it with humility instead of anxiety. You tell God your confusion and ask for clarity in due time. You remember that understanding often arrives after obedience, not before it. You resolve to practice the part you do grasp while trusting the rest to ripen in season. The unfolding of your words gives light. It imparts understanding to the simple. So Psalm 118:130, you turn this line into a lamp for the next hour. Illumination often comes as meaning unfolds, not as fireworks. Humility is not a barrier, it is the doorway by which wisdom enters. You practice carrying a single phrase into your day like a pocket ember. You write it on a small card or save it as a note on your phone. You set a quiet reminder to revisit it at lunch. You let it shape one decision, a tone you choose in a hard conversation, a boundary you keep when distractions knock, a kindness you extend where impatience once ruled. You allow repetition to become formation rather than boredom. You memorize a short line not to perform but to anchor. When worry rises, the line rises too, like a steady hand at your back. By evening, you notice your inner climate has shifted a few degrees toward hope. You also honor the seasons when reading feels dry. You choose shorter portions, richer pauses, and more embodied engagement. You walk while you recite. You kneel while you ask. You stand by the window and speak blessing over the street below. You borrow the prayers of saints when your own language falters, echoing psalms and promises until vocabulary returns. You refuse shame for feeling flat, because love can be constant while sensation is faint. You believe that roots drink beneath frost. You end by releasing one simple prayer, shaped by the words you lingered with. Let this take root in me today. You rise from the chair breathing a little easier, carrying holy air within your chest. You turn from the window toward the quiet center within and ask for holy warmth to rise where chill has lingered. You picture a hearth faint with embers and you kneel beside it, cupping your hands near the gentle glow. You do not demand spectacle. You welcome steady heat that can carry you through the day. You give permission for a deeper work than mood, for a rekindling that outlasts morning sentiment. You whisper a simple invitation. Come breathe on what is almost out. And you wait, not anxiously but attentively. You remember that fire spreads by contact, so you draw close to the presence that never cools. You let longing be honest rather than loud, and you consent to be warmed before you try to shine. You bring to the hearth what hinders brightness. You name the ash of cynicism, the damp of distraction, the soot of hidden resentment. You set these near the glow and ask for cleansing that is gentle yet thorough. You tell the truth about habits that siphon attention and leave you dulled. You ask for fresh desire for what is good, beautiful, and true. You imagine a bellows pressed lightly by gracious hands, sending small gusts across coals until orange threads appear. You allow that stirring, even if it exposes unburned fragments that need to be released. You trust that purification is kindness, not cruelty. And that warmth born of love never scorches what you entrust. Were not your hearts burning within you while he talked to you on the road, while he opened to you the scriptures? So Luke 24:32, you remember that holy heat often arrives while you listen and walk. Illumination travels with companionship, not isolation, and the road itself can become an altar. You practice a brief liturgy of ignition, hands open, breath slow, words simple. You pray, ignite love where apathy sits, kindle courage where fear has camped, warm tenderness where impatience has chilled. You ask for fruit that proves genuine warmth, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, not as badges but as evidence of inner combustion that blesses others. You resolve to guard this glow with wise boundaries, earlier rest, cleaner inputs, truer company. You decide to place your phone down during first light and lift your attention instead. You choose to bless someone you find difficult before noon, letting generosity become oxygen for the interior blaze. You make room for holy promptings that often arrive like sparking thoughts. Send that encouragement, give that resource, step across that room, apologize where you've delayed. You treat these nudges as matches rather than burdens. You stand up and follow one without dramatics. You let a small act become kindling. You remember that heat travels best through service. You pour coffee for another. You write a note of thanks. You give attention to the quiet person overlooked by louder needs. You realize how warmth multiplies when shared. The room changes a few degrees, and so do you. You accept that some days will still feel muted, and yet you refuse to equate sensation with absence. You choose fidelity over fireworks, depth over constant novelty. You repeat your invitation through the day, whenever chill returns during commute, between meetings, before a difficult call. You carry a short breath prayer like a pilot light. Light within. Guide my steps. You imagine walking through your tasks as someone radiant from within rather than fueled by adrenaline. By late afternoon, you glance back and notice subtle brightness where gloom had settled. Evening will bring its own needs, but this hour carries warmth enough to keep going. You end this movement with gratitude for presence that tends, fuels, and will not abandon what has begun to glow. You step into the day with a steady gait, carrying a small interior glow that does not need to impress anyone to be real. You choose a pace shaped by presence rather than pressure. You brew coffee, straighten the room, and treat these first motions as a quiet procession into ordinary holiness. You notice how the street brightens, how a breeze slips along the curb, how sparrows lift and settle like notes on a staff. You do not chase intensity, you welcome constancy. You ask for a life that burns long instead of merely bright. You decide that the measure of this morning will be obedience in small tasks, the reply crafted with care, the errand done without grumbling, the schedule held with open hands. You let your speech become a pathway where others can walk without fear of stumbling. You choose candor that is kind, firmness that is gentle, boundaries that guard dignity on both sides. Where irritation once snapped, you practice a softer answer. Where sarcasm once scored points, you trade in encouragement. You bless those who weary you, not because sentiment surges, but because grace has warmed your core. You forgive promptly so resentment cannot harden. When you cannot fix a situation, you commit to be a calming presence within it. You become the person who breathes slowly in tense rooms, who listens fully, who prays under your breath before offering counsel. Without announcing it, you carry quiet into noise. You treat labor as worship, not as a ladder. You approach your work with craftsmanship, giving attention to the unseen edges no one applauds. You keep promises, arrive prepared, admit limits, and request help before crises escalate. You plan breaks so focus stays honest. You refuse shortcuts that hollow the soul. You look for one person to serve beyond expectation and do it cheerfully. You see interruptions as possible invitations, rather than only intrusions. And yet you protect priority assignments with humble firmness. You remember that excellence without love corrodes, while love expressed through excellence blesses the people who touch your output. You go about your duties like someone entrusted, not entitled. You prepare for setbacks the way travelers pack for weather, not surprised by clouds, but ready for them. If old numbness flickers, you return to the practices that carried you. Honest admission, slow breathing, a short phrase from the page you kept, the breath prayer you learned at dawn. If you falter, you stand up quickly, free from self-accusation, and take the next true step. You shake off the ash of perfectionism so you can keep walking. You turn your attention outward when rumination loops, offering a word, a text, a small gift, a chore done quietly. You learn resilience as a rhythm: notice, name, release, receive, act. The ember holds. You gather with others so your warmth is not isolated. You seek out a mentor to ask wise questions, and you become an encourager for someone a step behind. You share stories that dignify struggle and spotlight faithfulness. You sing, even softly, when you need courage, letting melody carry truth beyond analysis. You practice end of day examine 2 lines of gratitude, 1 line of confession, 1 line of request. You lie down trusting that darkness is not a verdict, but a passage. Tomorrow you will watch the horizon again. The rekindled walk is not a sprint or a show. It is an ongoing yes in ordinary hours. A life lit from within, turning outward to warm the world you touch. You began with honest admission, welcomed soft light, opened your hands, breathed the word, asked for fire, and now you move with grounded courage. Let your next hour be simple. Notice 3 gifts. Choose 1 person to serve, carry 1 phrase as a pocket ember, and return to breath whenever worry tugs. Release outcomes you cannot control. Do the good you can. If discouragement visits, whisper, "Hold me close while I feel far," and take the next faithful step. End your prayer with quiet gratitude, trusting warmth to grow as you walk, not merely as you wait.